Church will close for good in July.
Religion is just not a central part of life for lots and lots of people. Today in America, about 25% of people report weekly church attendance, which puts us on par with a country like Italy. We were above 40% at one point. Amongst Catholics, 50% were weekly mass attenders in 1972. It's 20% today. So we're seeing a decline in religious attendance across almost every religious tradition, not just Protestants, but also Catholics as well. And Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, no one..."
In addition to being a pastor, Burge is also a political scientist, teaching at Eastern Illinois University, where he studies the intersection of faith, politics, and the data behind it, describing these broad trends in his 2023 book, The Nones, about the growing share of Americans who identify as atheists, agnostics, or nothing in particular.
90% of Americans used to identify as Christians in 1972. It's about 65% today. And the share of Americans who are white Christians is now below half. The Nones have gone from, N-O-N-E-S, have gone from 5% of America in 1972 to almost 30% of America today. Amongst young people, it's over 40% of America. So we're facing an entirely different religious landscape today than we did even 30 years ago.
What is your best understanding of what's happened, of why fewer and fewer Americans feel some connection with a church or with a faith?
I think a lot of it is that Americans are anti-institutional now. And if you look at data and trust in institutions, we don't trust anything today as much as we trusted it 40 years ago, whether it be banks or unions or the media or religion. They're not seeing the value that religion plays in people's lives. And they're also thinking, and I think this is the thing that I push back against the most, that religion is only about belief. Religion's also a social enterprise. You come here, you sit next to people who are different than you learn how to volunteer, you learn how to run meetings, you learn how to fundraise, you learn about the Bible, but you also learn that other people are good people.
Just a few miles away, some of those volunteers are helping the needy at this once-a-month food pantry, Angels on Assignment, where they provide free food, clothing, and help with expenses. The population of Jefferson County is shrinking as it ages, and its politics have swung further to the right. In 2000, voting 54% in favor of George W. Bush, to nearly 72% in favor of President Trump in 2020. Volunteers here join from across local denominations, but this outreach is organized by another mainline denomination in steep decline. The United Methodist Church has fallen from 11 million people in 1967 to half of that today, and in just the past 2 years lost about a quarter of its churches over issues surrounding same-sex marriage and LGBTQ clergy.
The Lord's table is the place where the distinctions between rich and poor, powerful and powerless are erased.
On a recent Sunday morning, though, First United Methodist pews were mostly full, with more joining online. And a full choir leading the congregation, including Keith and Cheryl Cox.
One more time.
A decade ago, Keith, a retired choir director, and Cheryl, a former German teacher and school administrator, moved from northern Illinois to the family farm here. The first church they joined closed, with too few members to sustain it. The next one, a Methodist church close to home, didn't align with their views on supporting border migrants through UMCOR, the church's relief agency, and the decision to close churches during the COVID-19 outbreak.
When I was on the church council and I heard the church leaders in that council being very unhappy about the fact that UMCOR was helping migrants and that the bishop was a terrible person for trying to keep people safe, that truly troubled me. And so I was not as interested in being a part of that church at that point in time.
Now, Keith and Cheryl drive 45 minutes each way, twice a week, to sing in the choir and worship at First United Methodist in Mount Vernon.
It's the best 45-minute drive that I have on a regular basis because I do feel uplifted when I go to the church. And I can't say that that's been true even at the other Methodist churches that I've been to.
And recognizing that politics was now a part of the church set of beliefs, how did that make you feel?
I think politics has invaded schools and healthcare and just about every aspect of our lives. So I shouldn't be surprised that it is invading in some ways in the church. But did it make me feel uncomfortable? Absolutely.
Singing alongside Keith and Cheryl Cox is Seth Calvert, who was drawn to this church first by its music, then by its message.
The Lord's table is the place where gay and straight and every other orientation in between can discover and receive the gift of God's life-giving grace.
It honestly, kind of rocks my world that there are people who are Christians who are actually open-minded.
The reasoning is they're going to...
Calvert lives in Mount Vernon with his husband, Brandon. He was raised Southern Baptist, but felt increasingly uncomfortable with that branch as he aged, especially as he heard things from the pastor that conflicted with his realization that he was transgender.
One of the examples that actually was the reason I ended up leaving that church was he was going on a tangent about, how trans rights was all bad and all that. And he said the civil rights movement was a mistake because now we have the gay rights movement. And it was like, that's wrong.
You were hearing that, and then what were you thinking?
I had been taught, if you see things going wrong, you always stay there and try and fix them. And that's what I was trying to do for years and years in that church. And then it got to the point that it's like, there's no way I can fix this. There's no way that me sticking around is going to be able to help these people see that what they're saying and doing is wrong.
It's almost like we've become a safe haven for refugees from other traditions and even other United Methodist churches who have felt excluded.
Victor Long leads this congregation of the United Methodist Church, whose motto is open minds, open hearts, open doors.
The churches they often come from are very rigid and narrow, and I know some have come from churches where politics was really the theme of the messages they heard, and they're looking for a safe place where they're not told what to believe, where they have freedom to ask questions and room to grow in their faith.
On the day we visited, Long delivered a sermon on the importance of unity.
The Lord's table is the place where Democrats can kneel alongside Republicans. Where else in the world are you going to see that?
I just felt like it was the right time for people to be reminded of that. And communion is the perfect setting for it, because that's when we come together as one and receive the bread and wine.
And when you say it's the right time, what's made it the right time, do you think?
Because all the other voices that get airtime in the church are about division and who's right and who's wrong, and we need to leave. And people need to hear that I believe Christ calls the church to unity in spite of our differences. It's not uniformity, but it's unity in the body of Christ.
Long says his congregation includes Republicans, Democrats, and everything in between, a hallmark of mainline Protestant churches. But that is becoming increasingly rare, according to Ryan Burge.
For a long time, we always thought that religion was the first lens and politics was downstream of that. So, what party I voted for, I looked at the Bible, I think about my theology, how I view the world, and then I picked Republican or Democrat. Now things have changed. The recent data says that we pick our religion based off our politics. So if I'm a Republican, I'm going to seek out a congregation that affirms my views and really tells me what I want to hear. So that's why a lot of people have left religion over the last 50 years. So even today, amongst liberals, 50% of them are non-religious. Amongst conservatives, it's only 12%. So what we're seeing more and more is people go, well, I can't do that.
In our next story, we'll visit an evangelical church in Tennessee that has leaned heavily into politics and President Trump, but is now having second thoughts. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Judy Woodruff in Mount Vernon, Illinois.